It was supposed to be a harmless joke. One man, standing just a few feet from a royal guard, decided to put on a little show for the crowd, cracking jokes, waving his arms, and trying to make the unshakable soldier crack a smile. People around him laughed. Phones came out. He was confident, smug, certain the guard wouldn't dare react. But then, it happened. A single movement, a sudden command, and the entire crowd froze. What the guard did next shocked everyone watching and turned a silly prank into something deadly serious. The man's smile vanished. Parents pulled their kids back, and the video of that moment has been replayed millions of times online. Why did the guard react the way he did? What really happened that day? Stay tuned, because this is a story you'll never forget. Subscribe and hit the bell. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Before we uncover exactly what happened that day, it's important to understand the men at the center of this story. The Royal Guards. To most tourists, they look like statues. In elaborate uniforms, tall black bearskin hats, bright red tunics, rifles resting firmly by their side. They stand so still, so expressionless, that people sometimes forget they are real soldiers. But make no mistake, they are not performers. They are elite members of the British Army, sworn to protect royal residences like Buckingham Palace. The Bijan. Stillness, you see, is not for entertainment. It is discipline. Every second they stand motionless is a demonstration of training that takes years to perfect. They are taught to ignore distractions, barking dogs, loud crowds, even people mocking them just inches away. That ability to remain unshaken is what fascinates millions of visitors every year. And yet, for some, this discipline is a challenge. Can I make him laugh? Will he react if I wave in his face? Let's see if I can break him. This attitude has become common among tourists, and while most keep their distance, every so often someone decides to push the boundaries. Most of the time, the guard will ignore it. But the truth is, these soldiers are not defenseless ornaments. They are trained to respond if their space is invaded or if someone shows blatant disrespect. That's what makes the story you're about to hear so remarkable. It wasn't just another tourist shouting a silly phrase or pulling a goofy face. This time, a man's joke went further than anyone expected. The crowd thought it was all harmless fun, until the guard reminded them that his duty is no laughing matter. On that day, in the heart of London, surrounded by curious onlookers and flashing cameras, centuries of tradition collided with one man's reckless humor. The result? A reaction so swift, so startling, that everyone there would remember it for years to come. It was a bright afternoon in London, the kind of day when Buckingham Palace is at its most alive. Tourists from every corner of the world crowded near. The tall black gates, cameras clicking, children perched on shoulders for a better view. The air buzzed with excitement, some waiting for the changing of the guard, others simply eager to see the soldiers they had only glimpsed in pictures. At the center of the courtyard stood one of those guards. Immaculate uniform, polished boots, gleaming in the sunlight. His bearskin hat cast a shadow over eyes that never wavered. He stood perfectly still, hands at his side, rifle held in flawless position. To most people it was mesmerizing. How could a man stand so rigid, so motionless, while surrounded by noise, chatter, and chaos? But not everyone in the crowd was satisfied with simply watching. Near the front of the barrier, a man in his 30s leaned forward with a grin stretched across his face. He wasn't there just to admire the spectacle. He wanted to make it about him. Whispering to the friends beside him, he gestured toward the guard and said loudly enough for others to hear, "Watch this. I bet I can get him to crack." The group chuckled. A few nearby tourists turned their heads, curious about what this man was about to do. He began small, waving dramatically in the guard's direction, pulling goofy expressions as though he was in some kind of silent comedy routine. The guard didn't move, not an inch. The man smirked. "See? He's trying not to laugh. I'll get him in a second." He exaggerated his steps, mimicking the stiff march that the guards are famous for, stumbling like a clown to earn laughs from the crowd. Some people chuckled politely, but others frowned. They knew the rules. They knew the guards were not there for entertainment, and this man was already stepping close to the line. Still, the guard remained locked in his unbreakable stance. Boots planted, chin raised, eyes forward. Encouraged by the attention, the man grew bolder. "Oi, mate," he shouted. "Lighten up. You look like you've been stood there for 100 years. A ripple went through the crowd. Some people laughed nervously. Others shook their heads. Parents pulled their children back, muttering warnings. Don't get too close. Don't mess with them. But the joker wasn't finished. He stepped closer to the rope, leaning in as if daring the guard to react. He mimicked the soldier's posture, puffing out his chest, stomping his foot in an exaggerated march. Still, nothing. For nearly 10 minutes, the guard didn't flinch. His silence became a wall the man couldn't break through, and yet, instead of giving up, the joker mistook it as weakness. "See? Told you," he bragged to his friends. "They can't do anything. He's just a statue." But what neither he nor anyone else in that crowd realized was that the guard was simply waiting, because the moment the man crossed the invisible line between playful mockery and disrespectful intrusion, the guard would act, and when he did, the entire atmosphere outside Buckingham Palace would change in an instant. The man's antics might have started as playful, but now his energy had shifted. With every passing minute, he grew louder, more theatrical, and more determined to drag the guard into his game. "Come on, mate," he shouted, cupping his hands around his mouth as if the soldier couldn't hear him. "Give us a smile, just a little one." The crowd stirred. Some people laughed nervously, but others exchanged uneasy glances. They had seen videos of guards reacting before. They knew this was not a game the man was likely to win. The joker, however, mistook their silence for encouragement. He launched into a one-man performance, exaggerating a stiff march and saluting clumsily like a child pretending to be a soldier. He puffed out his chest, swung his arms high, and stumbled about dramatically, sending his friends into fits of laughter. A few tourists chuckled politely, but the majority simply watched. Some shook their heads, some frowned, and more than a few whispered warnings. "You shouldn't do that. He's asking for trouble. They don't play around." The man ignored them all. He was enjoying the spotlight too much. He leaned closer toward the guard, tilting his head as if studying him. "How long have you been standing there, huh? Must be boring. Do you even blink under that hat?" Still nothing. The soldier's face remained unreadable, his eyes fixed firmly ahead. The silence only emboldened the joker. He took a few deliberate steps closer to the barrier, hovering near the invisible boundary that separated the guard's space from the crowd. His voice rose again. "What's the matter? Can't speak? Or do they just tell you to stand there and look pretty?" This time, the mood of the crowd changed. The laughter died down. Parents pulled their children further back, muttering, "He's pushing it now." Even the man's own friends seemed uneasy, glancing at each other nervously, but the joker refused to back down. He turned back to the audience he had created for himself and raised his arms dramatically, declaring, "See? He can't do anything. He's not allowed." There it was, the fatal mistake. Not the words themselves, but the arrogance behind them. The man had convinced himself that the guard was powerless, a living mannequin he could mock without consequence. The crowd, however, knew better. They sensed what was coming. A hush fell over the tourists, as though the entire courtyard had inhaled at once. The man grinned, pointing directly at the guard. "Watch this. I'll get him to move." And then, in a bold, reckless move, he mimicked the guard's stiff march again, this time stepping dangerously close to the restricted line. His boots hit the ground with exaggerated thuds as he puffed his chest out, raising his knees high. The crowd's whispers grew urgent. "He's too close. He shouldn't do that. Oh no. Still, the guard remained motionless. For the Joker, this was fuel to the fire. "See? Nothing," he bragged, throwing his arms wide. "He's just a statue in uniform." But what he didn't realize, what no one in that crowd truly knew, was that the guard was trained for this exact moment. For minutes the soldier had stood still, watching, waiting, assessing. And now, the line had been crossed. The guard was about to remind everyone why his silence was never weakness, but strength, discipline, and power held in reserve. The moment hung heavy in the air. The Joker's laughter echoed off the palace walls, but the crowd's response was different now. No one was laughing with him anymore. Parents gripped their children's hands tighter. Tourists lowered their phones slightly, sensing that what was about to happen would be far more serious than a funny video. The guard remained frozen, his rifle steady, his gaze locked ahead. For a second, it seemed like nothing would change. And then, it happened. In a sudden, thunderous motion, the guard stomped forward. His boot struck the pavement with such force it reverberated through the courtyard. The man's grin vanished instantly, his eyes widening in shock. The soldier's voice boomed, sharp and commanding. "Stand back!" The words cut through the air like a blade. Tourists gasped. Some jumped. Children clutched their parents as the sound of authority rolled through the crowd. It wasn't just loud. It was the kind of command that carried the weight of centuries of discipline. The Joker froze. His face drained of color. The bravado, the smug grin, the exaggerated performance, all of it evaporated in an instant. The guard didn't stop with words. He took another forceful step forward, his rifle clutched tightly, the polished steel gleaming in the sunlight. He wasn't attacking, but he was making it absolutely clear. This space, this duty, this tradition was not to be mocked. The crowd's reaction was immediate. Gasps turned into stunned silence. Phones were raised again, but this time not. For amusement, for proof, for capturing a moment that felt more like history than comedy. The Joker, desperate to save face, forced out a laugh. "Oh, come on, mate. I was just joking." But no one laughed with him. Not his friends, not the tourists, no one. The guard's stare was unflinching, his posture rigid, his rifle steady at his side. The message was crystal clear. This is not a game. The man stumbled backward, retreating a few paces as the crowd parted around him. His confidence crumbled. His smirk twisted into nervous embarrassment. He raised his hand slightly as though to show he meant no harm, but the damage was already done. What had started as a prank had ended with a lesson, not just for him, but for every single person standing there. The Royal Guard wasn't a prop, wasn't a statue, wasn't an entertainer. He was a soldier. And in that moment, his reaction had reminded everyone of it. The silence lingered for several seconds after the guard returned to his post. The soldier didn't move again, his boots planted firmly, his eyes locked forward, as if the incident had never happened. But the atmosphere around him was completely transformed. The crowd whispered in hushed tones, some shaking their heads, others muttering, "He deserved that," or "You don't mess with them." Parents crouched down to tell their children why they should always respect the guards. And the Joker? He slipped back into the crowd, avoiding eye contact, his earlier bravado replaced by shame. It was over in less than a minute, but to those who witnessed it, it felt unforgettable. A simple stomp, a booming command, and centuries of tradition defended in a single, powerful moment. The guard had proven once again what generations already knew. Their silence is not weakness. Their stillness is not fragility. Behind that unflinching exterior lies strength, discipline, and the readiness to act when the line is crossed. For a few long seconds after the guard's booming command, the courtyard outside Buckingham Palace was frozen in stunned silence. The air felt heavy, as though everyone was holding their breath at once, and then, slowly, the whispers began. He really moved. "Did you hear that?" he shouted. "I've never seen that before." What just moments earlier had been a playground for laughter had turned into something else entirely. A lesson in discipline that the crowd would never forget. Parents bent down to their children's level, pointing toward the guard. "See? That's why you respect them. They're soldiers." Meanwhile, the Joker's friends had fallen silent too. The grins on their faces had faded. They looked at each other awkwardly, uncertain whether to stay or to slip quietly away. The man himself, once the loudest voice in the square, now hovered at the edge of the crowd with his head low, doing everything he could to avoid attention. His earlier boast, "They can't do anything," now hung in the air like a bitter joke. But the tourists hadn't just witnessed the moment. Many had recorded it. The stomp, the command, the stunned expression on the Joker's face. Within minutes, videos were already uploading to social media. Some tourists narrated what they saw in real time, their voices trembling with excitement. "Oh my God, did you see that? He actually yelled at him." By the time the crowd dispersed that day, the first clips were already spreading across TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. The story was too compelling, too dramatic, to remain a private memory. The videos carried all the ingredients of virality. There was tension, a man mocking a soldier. There was comedy, his over-the-top antics. And then there was the twist, the soldier's sudden, thunderous reaction that turned the tables instantly. People around the world clicked, watched, and rewatched. Comments poured in. "He deserved that. Never underestimate the Queen's guards. This is why you don't mess around with them." Some people admitted they had always thought the guards were just ceremonial actors. Seeing the soldier break his silence shattered that misconception. Others applauded the guard's restraint, noting how he only reacted when truly necessary. And of course, thousands shared the clip with captions like, "This is what happens when you cross the line." Within days, the incident was featured in reaction videos, news articles, and discussion threads. The Joker became infamous, not by name, but as the guy who thought he could break a guard. His expression, frozen in shock as the guard thundered at him, became the highlight of countless memes. But behind the humor was a deeper respect that spread across the internet. People marveled at the guard's discipline, how he stood still for so long, absorbing the taunts, and only acted when it truly mattered. Many viewers said it changed the way they saw these soldiers forever. For those who had been in the courtyard that day, the experience had been unforgettable. For the millions who watched online afterward, it became a story, a warning, and a reminder. The royal guards are not props for entertainment. They are trained protectors of tradition and duty. In the end, the Joker had wanted attention. He had wanted the crowd's laughter, the spotlight of amusement. And he got it, but not in the way he had hoped. Instead of being remembered as the man who made a guard laugh, he became the man who made one roar, and that roar echoed far beyond Buckingham Palace, reaching screens, feeds, and conversations, all around the world. Long after the courtyard had cleared and the laughter had faded, the moment lingered in the minds of those who witnessed it. For some, it was just a shocking interruption to their sightseeing trip. For others, it was a viral clip to share online. But for many, it carried a deeper message, one that went far beyond Buckingham Palace. The truth is, the Royal Guards are more than just a popular tourist attraction. Their stillness, their silence, their unwavering composure. These are not parlor tricks for entertainment. They are the visible symbols of discipline, tradition, and service. Every second they stand at their post, they carry the weight of centuries of duty. And yet, so many visitors misinterpret that silence. They see it as weakness. They believe it gives them permission to test the guards, to mock them, to try and break their composure. But what the Joker learned that day, and what millions more were reminded of after watching the video, is that silence is not the absence of power. It is power under control. The guard could have reacted sooner. He could have responded at the first insult, or when the Joker first mimicked his march. But he didn't. He waited, he measured, he held his ground, and when the man finally crossed the line, the guard's reaction was swift, decisive, and unforgettable. That is discipline. That is restraint. That is strength. The Joker's mistake wasn't just about making fun of a soldier. It was about underestimating someone whose entire purpose is rooted in duty and protection. His arrogance turned into humiliation because he failed to understand what the guards represent. To the tourists in the square that day, it was a startling reminder that respect matters, not just for soldiers but for traditions, for spaces, and for people who carry responsibilities larger than themselves. And to those watching online, it was a cultural lesson wrapped inside a viral moment. In an age where people chase likes and attention with pranks and stunts, the incident was a sharp contrast. The Joker had set out to entertain, but in the end, it was the guard who taught the lesson, that some roles, some duties, are not to be trivialized. Perhaps that's why the video resonated so deeply. It wasn't just funny. It wasn't just shocking. It was symbolic. The guard represented discipline in a world that often rewards recklessness. He showed strength without violence, authority without excess. He proved that you don't need to lose control to command respect. Sometimes all it takes is one step, one stomp, one command delivered with the weight of history behind it. And what about the man who sparked it all? Maybe he walked away embarrassed, maybe even regretful. Perhaps he learned that some boundaries aren't meant to be crossed. Perhaps he didn't. But in truth, his personal lesson wasn't the most important part. The real impact was on the countless people who saw his mistake and understood, even from afar, why respect is always the wiser choice. Because in the end, this wasn't just about a single guard and a single prank. It was about what happens when discipline meets disrespect, when centuries of tradition stand face to face with arrogance, and when silence breaks with a roar that shakes the world awake. The message was simple, but powerful. Respect the guard. Respect the duty, respect the tradition, and if you forget, well, one stomp of a soldier's boot will be enough to remind you. What began as a simple joke ended as a story that no one present would ever forget. One man thought he could turn a centuries-old tradition into comedy. Instead, he walked away humbled, while the world was reminded of something far more important, the silent strength of those who stand watch. The royal guard didn't need a speech, didn't need to raise his weapon, didn't need to chase anyone away. With just one stomp, one booming command, and an unshakable presence, he restored respect in an instant. It was a lesson that rippled far beyond Buckingham Palace, a reminder that true power doesn't need to shout all the time. It waits, it endures, and when it finally speaks, the world listens, and maybe that's why this moment continues to resonate. Because in a time when so many chase attention through noise, chaos, and pranks, the guard showed the value of silence, patience, and authority. His reaction wasn't just about one disrespectful tourist, it was about defending tradition, respect, and discipline itself. So the next time you see a soldier standing still, silent and immovable, remember, there's a storm of strength behind that calm exterior. And if you're tempted to test it, think twice. You might just find yourself the star of a viral lesson you never wanted to learn. If you found this story as fascinating as we did, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with a friend, and of course, subscribe for more incredible true stories that reveal the hidden strength behind history, tradition, and people you thought you already knew. After all, this was just one joke. Imagine what other moments the world has yet to uncover.